speaker is an award-winning author who has worked internationally over 25 years with global industry leaders in the field of technology. She's a transformation mentor and coach, and an avid yogi, a yoga and meditation teacher, and also a freelance presenter. Let's welcome Smita Joshi. Thank you, Smita.
Thank you, Tanya. How are you?
Very good, very good. This is super high vibe going on here.
Yeah, I get the vibes. I get them. You guys, you're absolutely glowing. It's really nice.
Thank
and
you.
And a real honor to be a part of this expo. Really, it's a real honor, and some amazing speakers. So they're specialists in their fields. So good.
Thank you. So I will just remove myself here for us to access your brilliance, Smita.
Thank you. Good. Thanks so much. So today, let me just give as Tanya mentioned just now, first of all, everyone who's watching, thank you so much for joining. And some of you will know me, and as Tanya has just said, I'm a transformation coach, a yogi, and author of a trilogy. It's an Amazon bestseller called Karma and Diamonds. It's a journey of self-discovery across continents and lifetimes. It's about being the best you amidst life's chaos. And I'm sure many speakers have had different ways of getting to that same sort of being the highest within in their talks. I'm sure they've shared other strategies. Really, Karma and Diamonds is about tapping into your intuitive voice. Prior to writing Karma and Diamonds, as Tanya mentioned, I did work in corporates for a very long time. Most of my career has been in large corporates and, a hardcore, sort of very competitive environments. And one of the things that I did over that period of time was to actually develop a very strong connection to my own intuitive voice, which is why I'm really excited about talking about how intuition, how and why it works today. I'll be looking today, though, at the science, what accepted science has learned so far, and science on the fringe has learned so far about intuition. And I'll share with you some of the key takeaways. We'll explore the different types of intuition that have emerged from research studies. I'll be sharing what we've gleaned so far about the nature of consciousness, both in science and, of course, in metaphysics. And some of my own personal learnings over the last 3 decades as well. I'll be sharing something from that. So by the end of the talk, my intention is that I will have illustrated why intuition works. The how of it is also very interesting, but why does it work? I think that's the important thing to know. What you need to know about me, though, having talked about, what I'm going to talk about shortly, come on to some research studies and so on that I've done. But what you need to know about me is that I'm someone who relates to intuition like I breathe air. I mean, for over the last 30 years, I've consciously developed and sharpened my own skills in listening to my own intuition. I've learned the way it functions, the nonlinear language that it has, and how to trust my intuitive knowing. That's really the nub of it, is that we all have intuition, but how much have we learned to trust it? And so the consequence is that it's become the central guiding force in my own life. It's become my GPS. So personally, I really don't need any proof that intuition exists or that it works. When it comes to consciousness and intuition, for me, it's like what the brilliant American theoretical physicist Richard Feynman said. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with Richard Feynman. He said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." Richard Feynman, he was one of the greatest scientists of all time, and he led several of the breakthroughs in physics and quantum mechanics. He was one of the key scientists who actually advanced quantum mechanics. He wasn't among the most brilliant of mathematicians, but he let his intuition guide him, which is why I think he's a really interesting scientist to listen to. Intuition is like one of those things. I think most of us, at some time or other, even if you're very rational, logically oriented, most of us at some point will have had this sense of some form of intuition. And we kind of tend to assume that we know what it is, right? We know a lot about intuition. Intuition, of course I know what it is. But if I were to say to you, how well could you explain it? And how about teaching, becoming intuitive to others? Quoting Richard Feynman again, he said, I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. So even though, as for myself, I might feel like intuition is second nature to me, I've done a deep dive into studying it from the perspective of others, such as scientists at MIT who are exploring intuition to make artificial intelligence more human, astronauts researching models of consciousness, researchers looking to improve decision-making in business and to be more creative in research and development functions, philosophers and early scientists of ancient India, my ancestors, you might say. And so I'm going to take a look at, first and foremost, I'm going to take a look at some of the findings from science. The one commonality in the research that I found about intuition was none of these studies made definitive conclusions, other than that there was a case for conducting further studies into understanding intuition. So no conclusions, but that we should keep looking. So what I've learned about intuition after looking around and, studying all these people is actually intuition is a poorly understood field. Now, that said, I did come across some especially interesting findings in some of the papers. And before I can share those interesting things with you, let me first tell you a little bit about the various theories that I looked at. One is a research paper published in the Journal of Cosmology in 2011 called The Quantum Hologram and the Nature of Consciousness. Another study from 2000, it's by the same author, is called Nature's Mind, the Quantum Hologram. This research promotes quantum hologram as the theory that attempts to explain how the whole of creation learns, how it self-corrects, and evolves as a self-organizing, interconnected, holistic system. One of the authors of this study is a chap called Edgar D. Mitchell. He was an Apollo astronaut and the sixth man to walk on the moon. Edgar Mitchell's findings are referenced in another paper that I looked at by Paul Bernstein. This one was published in 2005 called Intuition. So Edgar D. Mitchell, the 2000 paper was referenced in Paul Bernstein's paper called Intuition, What Science Says So Far About How and Why Intuition Works, which is where I get the title of my talk, because pretty much it's exactly what I wanted to present today. So in Paul Bernstein's paper, intuition was defined for the purposes of their analysis as the appearance in the mind of accurate information about the external world, which can be shown to have come not through the five senses, nor through a rearrangement of stored memory contents, which means basically it's not memory. That intuition that they looked at is not coming from memory, and it's not coming from the rational mind. So it's something coming from beyond the rational mind. In this paper, they studied things such as telepathy, precognition, presentiment, and remote viewing. So they studied various types of intuition, and people that they did the studies with that had these various abilities, they call these people collectively as healers. So these theories explored how the human brain might be able to provide intuitively acquired information, which is not coming from the rational mind. So intuitively acquired information, and then present it to the conscious mind. There's a professor at Stanford University called Professor William Tiller, who discovered that intuitive information was sent from one person to another via magnetic wave forms. So one person to another, so when a clairvoyant or a medium, somebody picks something up, they're picking up that information and transmitting it to somebody else via magnetic waveforms. I mean, someone who's not present, that they're not actually physically talking to. And they also, another team of researchers found that healers have an output that is 103 times greater than the norm for a person's skin response, and 105 times greater than the standard heart voltage, and 106 times greater than the average brain voltage. That's healers. That's how they function. Then the connection between the mind and the neural system was studied. They looked at how does the mind and the nervous system actually work, the neural system. How might the human neural system communicate with the conscious mind? Some researchers proposed that the DNA is a likely transducer. The DNA, because the DNA molecule is present in the nucleus of every cell in the body. They said that the DNA's double helix structure makes it apt for enabling information transfers. But they also said that if that's not the case, if that's not happening, then, and intuitive information doesn't arrive on superluminal magnetic waves, then it could instead show up through quantum hologram phase resonance, explored by our moon man, the Apollo astronaut, Edgar D. Mitchell, whom I mentioned earlier. Now, they said in that case, the information conversion takes place through nerve cells that have something that is extremely microscopic in structure, and it's called microtubules. So DNA and microtubules so far. That could be potentially involved in helping us to intuit and then present it to the brain. That's because these have the ability to respond to changes at the quantum level, at the very, very quantum level. So transducers such as DNA and microtubules, they can convert magnetic or quantum carried information into signals that can then travel to the brain for processing. And there is currently research going on to explore the properties of DNA and other molecules that have superconducting ring structures, because scientists expect that structures such as microtubules could behave like antennae that pick up the smallest quantum fluctuations, even through entanglement from the other side of the universe. So there may be little antennae that we carry in our own physical bodies, and there must be, because we pick things up. But that's what they're studying, and that no matter how far that information is coming from, we have the potential to be able to pick it up. Now, entanglement. It was Albert Einstein who discovered entanglement. And I'll come back to entanglement, what it is and how it works a little bit later. Now, how do intuitives actually pick up information? They've been said to have information first appear to them through, like as a vague sensation, that then turns into a partially focused image. And I know as an intuitive that there are other ways. I personally pick up information in many different ways, but that's what the scientists have so far stated. This movement has been linked to the processes related to the right hemisphere descending to the left. So information from the right side to the left side of the brain. So when information gets disseminated across the hemisphere, that's when we start to question the correctness of intuitive sensation or the image. And this is the left brain. This is the left brain judging the right brain. So the left brain starts to get into question and starts to analyze and question, is this right? Is it wrong? Does it fit our framework? And so on. So then we ourselves, if you're an intuitive, you're receiving that information, you have, many of you, I'm sure, you will have your own ways of picking information up, and you will have done this. You'll have had a chat with yourself. You kind of go, it's interesting. Like, what was that? What was that image? What was that sensation? And then you may discuss that with other people once you've had a chance to think about it yourself. And then the idea is then to see how well this information that we receive kind of fits into our frame of reference, what we know, what we understand, what we accept as being valid. So that process then happens actually in the conscious brain. So at the end of the dialogue, we either accept that information or we reject it. Now, strangely enough, interestingly enough, or I might rather say, of course, the heart is also involved in sifting of information that is intuitive. So sifting of intuition. The activity in the heart's neural system is linked to processing of intuitive perception. It's also believed that these changes affect the brain's frontal lobes. So the heart to the brain. Research continues right now to clarify the complex relationship between the heart, the brain, and intuitive processing. Now, 2 more studies that I looked at were carried out. One was at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland and another at the University of Paris. And they distinguished 5 types of intuition. The first university in Scotland, they came up with 2, and the other in Paris were 3. So the first 2 types that were distinguished were between intuitive judgment and intuitive insight. Intuitive judgment and insight. The first is intuitive judgment. Now, this is intuition used for decision-making in management scenarios. So it's intuitive judgment, they concluded, is used for management decision-making. The second being being intuitive insight. That's what we use, they found, for creativity and invention. So that's 2 types of intuition. The third is called socio-affective intuition. This type of intuition is useful in relationships, in understanding others and having sensitivity to other people's feelings. And the fourth type of intuition is called applied intuition, which is directed towards finding solutions to problems for accomplishing tasks. And the fifth type of intuition is called free intuition. Free intuition is when you get a feeling of foreboding about the future, like something is about to happen and you sense that restlessness, or however it may appear for you. For me personally, I always have this sense of restlessness and this kind of, a sense of like, oh, something's going to happen or something's happening. Or what is it? What is it? Now, Winston Churchill was well known to have such precognitions. He once had this feeling that he should sit on the opposite side of the car to where he usually liked to sit. Later, a bomb exploded under his usual seat. So a common denominator of intuitive phenomena is a feeling of knowing, and knowing without knowing why. So summing up from the various research, there seems to be an agreement so far that intuition is the key to achieving significant creative results. Intuition is the key to achieving significant creative results. The creation of great novums have been found, or new knowledge that is. They seem to have been found, or rather based on intuition. They seem to have arrived through intuition in the first place. There's a general trend reflected in the theories that I've mentioned so far that intuition is not a product of the rational mind so far. But is that really the complete picture? Can that be the complete picture? Could it be that intuition comes from the subconscious brain? That's the largest part of our brain, and it's constantly observing, it's continuously processing. That's where a lot of proto-thoughts, or rather pre-thoughts, bubble up and become our conscious thoughts. In fact, in this very month's edition, this is very recent research, and this very week I read this, in this very month's edition of Science et Vie, a respected French scientific journal, they brought to light another type of intuition. Neuroscientists have now observed an intuition that's based on past experience. Past experience. Normally, when signals are picked up from the outside world via the 5 senses, the conscious part of the brain, or the prefrontal cortex, it processes the signals received and decides what to do with them, fight or flight, and so on. But in the case of this new intuition, the prefrontal cortex is actually short-circuited and bypassed, sending sensory signals straight to the subconscious. Then the subconscious determines, based on past experience, that's what this particular study has found, how to pattern these new signals, how to make sense of them, whether to accept them and what to do with them. And then the subconscious instructs the prefrontal cortex what to do. So it's the other way around to what normally happens. So what neurologists are currently saying is that this type of intuition is based on past experience. Now, while there may well be a past-based intuition, that can't be the entire truth either. Because we know that any new knowledge can only come from intuition. A giant of a scientist and polymath, Henri Poincaré, said, "It is by logic that we prove, but by intuition that we discover." It is by logic that we prove, but by intuition that we discover. And he should know, he was an amazing scientist, mathematician, a polymath. He was, in fact, he was known to be a master in all the sciences. My own feeling is that intuition comes from the realms of consciousness beyond the rational mind. That's my experience. But it's a theory. That's a theory. Just right for the time being, it has to be a theory. That's because we haven't advanced sufficiently in science to make it an absolute fact. Today's scientists, though, they're also looking to understand the nature of consciousness. I said, just now that intuition, I believe, comes from realms of consciousness beyond the rational mind. So what is consciousness? And scientists are looking to understand that. Their study of the quantum non-local field, one interpretation being the quantum hologram, and similar studies build on quantum mechanics from the previous century. These explorations are looking to prove such things as the interconnected of the universe, the connected of consciousness, and the relationship between the observer and events, and so on. So the great rishis, the sages of ancient India, talk about being the witness, that we are the witness, and so being the observer, that you're the observer. So this is what's being looked into now in science. And that said, in that particular regard, the theory about the quantum non-local field is still speculative. We don't have much on this yet, and certainly not hard facts that we can conclude. But what we do know is that consciousness is something that so far no one has managed to measure. What these studies show is that what we can measure is what takes place in the physical brain, and that's only after intuition's been received and it starts to be processed through the brain and the nervous system. But by then, intuitive knowledge has just already become just more information for the brain to process. And the brain is not the mind. The brain is not consciousness. The conscious brain is merely the hard disk, the storage, the processor. It serves to act on information that is already available, not an information that is not yet there. So that's where we hit limitations in trying to understand something as complex as consciousness and intuition. That brings me to the understanding about the nature of consciousness that the Ancient Seers of India have given us. They had a vast theory of the various elements of the field of consciousness, perhaps more than anyone else has done so far. As long ago as 7,000 years or even more, they understood something profound in relationship to consciousness. Quoting a Sanskrit text called Chandogya Upanishad, it says, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Indeed, all is Brahman, they said. Brahman is the unchanging reality in the midst of and beyond the world, which cannot exactly be defined. Brahman is the unchanging reality in the midst of and beyond the world, which cannot exactly be defined. Now, the Indian sages called rishis, they were deep, deep thinkers. Thousands of years before the Greeks, they had already established frameworks and methodologies for examining and investigating complex phenomena in the cosmos and consciousness. There's an Indian school of philosophy called Mimamsa. Indian hermeneutics is actually based on the methodology given by Mimamsa. The term Mimamsa is derived from the Sanskrit root man, to think, consider, examine, and investigate. Here, this term etymologically means desire to cogitate and is used to signify a thorough consideration, a thorough examination or investigation of the meaning of ancient Indian Vedic texts. Mimamsa, therefore, is a rational inquiry, which attempts at rational conclusions. I've quoted what I've just said from a beautiful, deep, deep text called Mimamsa, the study of Hindu exegesis, the interpretation of sacred texts. And the author describes the field of Brahman as follows. He says, Brahman, derived from Briha, the expansive, and Brihatvam, meaning greatness, can be defined as the absolute, whence all of existence arises, by which everything is actually sustained and into which everything dissolves ultimately. Brahman is the absolute. By definition, that means it's supersensuous. It's beyond comprehension or cognition. The author of Mimamsa text says it cannot even be understood inferentially, for every inferential dynamic depends upon a repeated perceived connection between that which is to be proved and its characteristics. For example, between fire and smoke. In fact, Brahman also means sacred wisdom. It is both the knowledge, the knower, and the thing to be known. So the knowledge bearers of India, they also talked about something called the Akashic records. I believe Dr. Erwin Laszlo was on earlier. He studied the Akashic field quite deeply. Akash means simply space. Akashic records are said to be the record of all knowledge, of all human experience, and the history of the cosmos. Call it a cosmic library. That's my term for it, the cosmic library. In fact, in my books, the Karma and Diamonds trilogy, I write about several instances of where I was able to access the Akashic records to complete some traumatic past lives in order to resolve real life blocks in this present life. It has many uses, the Akashic records. But the intelligence in the field of Brahman and its components, such as the Akashic records and even intuition, these are most likely beyond the rational mind. The field of consciousness is something that you can interpret spiritually, but actually, the ancient Indian rishis of India intended for it to be looked at scientifically. They had a structured way of thinking about it, and then this was a scientific approach. The Greeks later picked up on the frameworks and the methodologies left by the Indian seers, and then they expanded on these and similar methods that much later led to the Age of Enlightenment. A lot of spirituality is about connecting the rest of consciousness in the universe and the universe itself. So some people will see, that connection as God, and some people will see it as a higher entity. mystic traditions throughout the ages of India, in Persia, in Egypt, and Christianity, Islam, and even some pre-Christian religions, they say that God is in all of us and interconnects us. They're trying to get to the same point as the Indian rishis. But unlike the Indian sages, who were nothing but early scientists, these others are framing it from a religious perspective. But none of this answers my question conclusively. Where does intuition actually come from? Coming back to the study that found the subconscious working in the cases of intuition, could it be that the subconscious is only using classic sensory perception? Or is there more to this? Because what the quantum field scientists seem to suggest, and some of the others as well that I mentioned earlier, and that's what they're suggesting, is that there is something, so the subconscious is being picked up by something other than, what is classically sensory. If the subconscious brain is picking up sensory signals, then what is the antenna of the subconscious brain? Could it indeed be the DNA, microtubules, and the other molecules that have these superconducting ring structures that were mentioned in some of the earlier studies? Now, this is where Einstein's discovery of entanglement could prove useful. Entanglement, what it means is it's two particles that are far away from each other and that are somehow connected through what seems to be a tunnel in time and space. The implication is that there's some sort of a tunnel. See, if you have to physically go through time and space from one entangled particle to the other, you would literally have to travel faster than the speed of light, and nothing travels faster than the speed of light. The most recent elementary particle physics has found that entanglement is actually the mechanism that makes the fabric of time and space. It actually, entanglement, that time space thing that we're talking about, entanglement actually makes the fabric of time and space possible. Entanglement is not just faster than light. It's actually instantaneous connection. And this suggests a totally interconnected universe. That's what Leonard Susskind and his team have found at Stanford University. Some of you who've been watching The Big Bang Theory, you will have heard the Leonard Susskind and Richard Feynman being mentioned many, many times by Leonard himself, probably. And this line of thinking is very recent. What Leonard Susskind and his team are talking about, it's only from the last 15 years. Now, Richard Feynman, he had this saying. He said, all true science is at the fringe. All true science is at the fringe. There's clearly something going on here with intuition and in the understanding of consciousness. But we haven't grasped it yet. We're really trying to find what it is. And it's on the fringe. It's in contested territory where there's controversy. But Richard Feynman also said that that's where science has to go. Science has to go to the contested territory. It has to go to the fringe. And when you have to go where there's no Wikipedia for something yet, what do you go on? You can only go on intuition. So what that tells us is that all science begins only with intuitive theories. All science begins only with intuitive theories. Therefore, all new knowledge must arise out of intuition. And this, my friends, is why intuition works. We may not know where intuition comes from. We may not know where it comes from. And in spite of not knowing, we know that intuition works. Now, I'm going to ask you guys, I can't see the comments yet, but I will see it later. I would love for you guys, if you're watching, just to say, give me your thoughts about where do you think intuition comes from? And the one thing that even scientists seem to agree on in the papers that I've read so far is that to experience intuition, you have to calm the activity of the mind. Now, if there's time left, what I'd like to do is I'm not sure we have time. I had a meditation prepared. It's called A Star-Studded Sky. Would have liked to play it. I think we're not going to make it. I don't really have enough time today. But what you can do is please go to my website, smitajoshi.com, and go to the tab under free gifts. There's a bundle of things that you can just download for yourselves. And I'd love for you to enjoy that. Now, what I would like to do is perhaps if Tanya has any questions for me, or I could actually have a little dialogue with you about that. Tanya, hi.
Hi. Beautiful. We've got someone here answering your question that you were asking from Higher Self Soul. From Higher Self Soul. I agree with you. Personally, I am on your side. I just wish the scientists would get there. Beautiful. So I wrote the same thing in other words. Yeah. I think the description of the higher self, how we describe the higher self, I think that's what we have to sort of find that in accepted science. What is that? Where does that come from? Where is that? How does that exist in time, space, and what we understand? So that's why intuition is powerful, because if we didn't have that intuition, we wouldn't actually go and explore that at all. But the other thing I think, Tanya, I think it's really useful to talk about is intuition from the point of view of how does intuition show up. Now, as I mentioned, one of the things I said earlier was that it's a non-linear language. It's a non-linear language. And it's not like the rational mind, we structure things. It's extremely unstructured. It doesn't happen linearly in time and space. Sometimes it shows up as an image. So today, my husband just texted me a picture of a peacock that's landed in our garden today, out of the blue, a peacock. And, peacocks have a huge amount of meaning personally for me. The peacocks symbolize something in my mind. For me, they're very special for various reasons. And without going into what those are, it was for me, I'd say, oh, that's a sign. That's like, because earlier in the day when I was in my, when I was meditating, I kind of said, just give me something that will put a smile on my face, that will, tell me that I'm on the right track, and boom, we get, so it's, the point I'm trying to make is that, it shows up in very different non-linear ways, and you have to be able to recognize it and not dismiss it instantly. So, when, for example, the example of Winston Churchill wanting to sit in a different place, had he not listened, and wanting to sit one particular day at the opposite side of the car to where he normally sat, bomb went up under his normal seat. And who knows? I'm not sure whether he was in the car at the time or not. But, had he been in the car, that could have potentially been really, and I don't know how big the bomb was, but it could have potentially been, wow, really bad, So, we have instinct, we have different types of intuition. And I think the interesting thing about what science is doing is looking at the different types of intuition that there are. So we're not broad brushing intuition. Now, as somebody who loves to master a theme, I really like that. I really like that we're looking at different types of intuition. How does that work? When can I apply that? So we're not necessarily needing to sit in meditation to come up with that. But one thing is very clear. If your mind monkeys are loud, and by the way, I've got another meditation called Tame Your Mind Monkeys on my website. Please go and download it. It's really about calming the mind and, bringing yourself to a place of non-judgment and just being willing to being willing to receive, to get gold
from that part of you that has the wisdom, and that part of you that can actually give you answers that you may never arrive at rationally. And one of the things that I personally have found intuition very useful for is when the world outside of me is telling me that something I'm doing or something that I want to accomplish is simply, not possible or crazy, or I'll never get there, or they're not validating me in any way, then I've turned inwards. And that's where I find that intuition is amazing, because you start listening to that inner voice, that calm inner voice, not the voice of the mind monkeys. I'll be talking about, by the way, these types of things in a corporate set in terms of how this relates to corporates in a talk I'm doing on the 29th, also another live, with the soul exploration. So I think it's really interesting to have that awareness of how can you become a master at tapping into, you could have had a row with somebody, you could have, had your mind could be completely in a state of, imbalance and a frenzy. But it's important to learn how to calm that down instantly. And as the fabulous speaker before me said, Tanya, you're very good at being able to do that just through the breath, using the breath, just an inhale. 5 inhales is my count. 5 inhales, master that, train yourself to become absolutely super calm in 5 inhales, and somebody who you might just want to go and bash their heads because they've upset you so much, but 5 inhales, 5 exhales, and there we are. In fact, I'd invite you to try it now. Just simple, closing your eyes, just breathing, inhaling, just closing the mouth, relaxing, lifting the shoulders, just relaxing into the seat, and just putting a little smile on your face. Like how amazing is it that our minds are who we are as human beings. We can instantly shift states. We can actually morph from one state to another that quickly. So inhaling and exhale. Lengthen the inhale as you inhale the next time. Just allow the inhale to open into the heart center and go a little bit deeper into the belly. As you exhale, allow the exhale maybe even to become audible through the mouth. And allowing the breath as you inhale the next time, just allowing the breath to become like the surf on a beach of the ocean. Inhale. And relax and exhale. Just allow the mouth to really become present to the cosmic joke that life really is. Inhaling again. This is the 4th inhale. And exhale. And inhale last time. And a loud audible exhale. Beautiful. So there we are.
Beautiful, Smita. And I can attest and corroborate 100% that intuition works for every single kind of decision, whatever we, even the simplest things in our daily lives, I always feel first, do afterwards. So it really, really works for anything. Thank you so much for sharing so much content, so much knowledge, so much wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm absolutely honored. See you soon.